Law Museum. Handcrafted mesquite furniture was made for the building in 18th century style. A sculpted Spanish-styled fountain was installed where the original
members and representatives of the various ministries, departments, and agencies. Just before we start, I just want to convey the committee's apology for the delayed start and thank you for your patience. Okay, so I'd like to welcome the officials from the various ministries and departments, the members of the media, and the listening public to this public hearing of the PAAC. The Committee on the Public Administration Appropriations, PAAC, has a mandate to consider and report to the House of Parliament on A, the budgetary expenditure of government agencies to ensure that expenditures embarked upon in accordance with parliamentary approval. B, the budgetary expenditure of government agencies as it occurs and keep Parliament informed of how the budget allocation is being implemented. And C, the administration of government agencies to determine hindrances to their efficiency and to make recommendations to the government for improvement of public administration. The purpose of the 17th public meeting of the Public Administration and Appropriations Committee for the 11th Parliament is to follow up the stakeholders with regard to the third and fourth reports of the committee. The third report of the PAAC entailed an examination of the system of inventory control within the public service, in which the committee identified a number of issues including poor inventory control management, lack of training for persons involved in inventory control, and widespread vacancies in the relevant posts. Additionally, the committee's fourth report encompassed an examination of the system of internal audit within the public service, in which numerous issues were identified, such as inefficient internal audit checks, challenges in filling internal audit vacancies, lack of training for internal audit staff, and inadequate qualifications for internal audit posts. The committee is therefore desirous of hearing from the relevant stakeholders on the progress made in the implementation of the committee's recommendations contained in both reports. This meeting is being held in public and is being broadcast live on Parliament's Channel 11, Radio 105.5 FM, and the Parliament's YouTube channel, ParlView. Viewers and listeners can send their comments related to today's inquiry via email, parl101@ttparliament.org, facebook.com/ttparliament, Twitter @ttparliament. I therefore now invite the representatives of the various offices and departments to introduce themselves. And may I start with the PS of the Office of the Prime Minister.
Okay. Sorry about that. Good afternoon, everyone. Maurice Sweet, Permanent Secretary to the Prime Minister.
Good afternoon, everyone. Members of the committee, members of the ministries and departments present. I'm Beresford Riley, Chief Personnel Officer.
Good afternoon, everyone. Gail Evelyn, Acting Deputy Chief Personnel Officer.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members, other persons at the head table. Claudel McKellar, Acting Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Public Administration and Communication.
Good afternoon, members, Chair, and other colleagues. Angela Lum-Joseph, Acting Director, Public Management, Ministry of Public Administration and Communications.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. I am Michelle Durham-Kisoon, Acting Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Finance.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Catherine Laban, Controller of Accounts.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee, everyone in attendance. My name is Joycelyn Thomas Vialmosa, Acting Deputy Controller of Accounts.
Personnel Administration.
Good afternoon, Chair and members of the committee. I am Prabhavati Maraj, Acting Director of Personnel Administration, Service Commissions Department.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. Cheryl Ramrup, Human Resource Advisor 3, Public Service Academy, Ministry of Public Admin and Communications.
Good afternoon, Chair, committee members. My name is Denise Phillip, Acting Director, Public Service Academy.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee. My name is Kay Charles, member of the Public Service Commission.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairman, members of the committee, all present. I am Mrs. Parvati and Mol Singh Mahabir, Deputy Chairman, Public Service Commission.
Good afternoon to everyone. I am Carol Maureen, Public Management Consultant 2, Ministry of Public Administration and Communications.
Good afternoon, everyone. Madam Chair, members.
Good afternoon, everyone. Madam Chair, members. My name is Savitri Balkaran, Acting Director of the Public Management Consulting Division, PMCD, of the Ministry of Public Admin and Communications.
Might I? Sorry, please.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the committee, and everyone present. I am Jayawanti Ramdas, Assistant Auditor General.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Gayatri Maharaj, Assistant Auditor General.
Thank you very much. And might I ask the members of the committee to introduce themselves, starting at my extreme right.
Good afternoon and welcome. I'm Nicole Olivier, member.
Good afternoon, welcome. Brigadier General Ansel Antwine, member.
Good afternoon and welcome. Wade Mark, member.
Good afternoon and welcome. Ronald Huggins, member.
Hi, afternoon everyone. Jennifer Rafful, member.
And good afternoon again. I am Bridget Anisette George, chairman. So as we said, this is a follow-up conversation emanating from our earlier inquiries into inventory control and internal audit. And my recollection is from our earlier conversation, there seemed to have been some lack of clarification among the various ministries and departments with respect to the form of keeping their records for inventory control. And the Auditor General's Department had clarified that the regulations didn't require a physical manual record, so that nothing prevented ministries from implementing also an electronic system. The physical record was needed for the purposes of examination. So that my first question is really to the Auditor General, and to ask, in light of that particular observation, between the last inquiry and now, if the Auditor General has taken any steps to improve the understanding or to remove the sort of misconception that exists in the various ministries and departments.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I'm happy to report that the Comptroller of Accounts issued a circular number 5, dated 13th of April 2017, regarding the proper control of inventory. And this circular outlined guidelines for 7 different areas. And the circular clarified a lot of the gray areas that existed from the last conversation that we had here. So like the first area spoke of the procurement, and in that procurement area, it said that because of the pending proclamation of the new Public Procurement and Property Disposal Act, without that proclamation, full proclamation, the Central Tenders Board ordinance still must be followed. The second issue that it addressed was inventory management. Again, it clarified how records are to be kept and how public officers and accounting officers must be in compliance with the financial regulation, the stores regulations. So they took these areas and they emphasized all the regulations and the financial directives that must be followed for proper inventory management. The third area clarified was in relation to the ordering and procurement of stores. Again, they related back to the Central Tenders Act, Central Tenders Board Act, and they went on to talk about the adequate record keeping. And again, they pointed out to the financial regulations and financial instructions in relation to stores. They spoke of the adequate record keeping also, and the last point that they spoke of was the internal audit rule in relation to inventory control. And there they did emphasize that internal auditors should include in their annual work program the inventory checks. So I think with proper strict compliance with that new circular that was issued in April of 2017, I don't foresee ministries having a problem with the issues that were previously discussed in the prior committee meetings.
And therefore, may I ask then the Controller of Accounts, because the circular was prepared by the Controller of Accounts.
Controller of Accounts.
Yeah. And it might be more fair to ask the representative from Controller of Accounts, Ms. Laban, could you say if it addressed directly the fact that inventory control could also be done electronically?
Madam Chair, what we had indicated is that in order to move seamlessly to an electronic inventory control system, we first needed to standardize the coding system. So we were looking at first standardizing the coding system of all ministries and departments with the intention of putting this information on an access database. Therefore, it would be easier to transfer to an electronic system. It will facilitate an easier transfer to an electronic system, yes.
So could you say where this universal coding system has reached?
Well, we did, in the circular, we had given a spreadsheet to ministries and departments. We have been monitoring. There is not full compliance at this time, but some ministries have been using the coding system.
So could you give us an idea of how many ministries have complied thus far, and also what sort of steps you're going to ensure compliance by maybe a specific date, if you could identify that, by all the ministries?
Currently, I can't give an exact figure as to who have been complying, because we recently started to monitor all the ministries and departments, but we can get that information for you. Yes.
Can I ask if you have a cutoff date by which you expect 100% compliance?
No, we thought it would have been by the end of this financial year, but that has not happened. But what we are also looking at is setting up another training for the ministries in inventory management.
Right. So you meant the last financial year, I mean, the one that just ended, or the end of this financial year?
The end of December, this calendar year.
This calendar year?
We were looking at.
All right, so that then, therefore, if I said in the first quarter of 2018, if that were a reasonable time to expect universal compliance, would that be correct?
Yes, we could look at that. Yes.
Okay, so that you'll give us some feedback report on compliance thus far and your projections for compliance 100%. I therefore will invite Member Raful to take the conversation further.
Afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for being here and for the responses that were submitted. In reading through the responses, there were two things that I thought were very proactive, and I wanted to follow up on the timelines especially. One was the Integrated Financial Management Information System, and the second is the International Public Sector Accounting Standards Adoption. Both are being led by the Ministry of Finance, and the timelines have been between 2016 and 2017 in terms of the training and awareness. And then the IFMIS program, the Integrated Financial Management Information System, is supposed to be a 3 to 5 year implementation period. I'm curious to see if that has started yet and the timelines that are ensuing with these two programs.
With respect to the IFMIS, bids were received by 5 shortlisted firms in July of this year, July 2017.
Sorry, I didn't hear what you said.
I'm not hearing. With respect to the IFMIS, bids were received in July 2017 of 5 shortlisted firms. The ministry has since evaluated the bids that was between September and November this year. They are currently awaiting non-objection from the IDB in order to start the contract finalization of the contract. It is anticipated that by the next quarter of this financial year, the contract should be signed for the purchase, for the vendor for the purchase and installation of the IFMIS.
Okay.
With respect to IPSAS, ministries were trained in the IPSAS format in March 2018. We have since, 2017. We have since started to receive cash basis IPSAS statements from all the ministries and departments. This has proven to be a challenge, however, because it's really a semi-automated system. We are not fully integrated, so getting the information from the ministries and also Treasury collating the information is a bit of a challenge, but this is happening currently.
Okay. Thank you for your response. Can you elaborate a bit more on how many ministries have been able to follow the integrated system and the timeline for expectation for all ministries to be compliant?
Sorry, the integrated, we don't currently have an integrated system.
Okay.
So because we are looking towards implementing the IFMIS, if we get a vendor on board this financial year. With respect to the IPSAS, we are currently, yes, collating. We use spreadsheets to collate get the information to collate from the ministries to put it on a particular format. And that is what is happening currently.
Okay. And when do you expect that the entire public sector, all the ministries, would be able to be compliant with the IPSAS, the International Financial Accounting Standards?
Currently, they are doing the cash basis statements in that format. The intention was to submit these statements along with the public accounts for financial year 2017. So that hasn't happened as yet, and it will not happen for January. So we anticipate that it would happen for the next financial year.
Okay, next financial year, meaning by the end of 2017 fiscal, i.e. October, well, end of September 2018?
Yes, but that would be for the submission of the public accounts in the format, because at the end of January, we are to submit the public accounts to the Auditor General already.
So it would be the following fiscal year?
It will have to be the following fiscal year.
Okay, thank you.
Member Huggins.
To you, Madam Chair. Now, at the hearing on February 8, 2017, Ministry of Public Admin and Communications, you identified some challenges in terms of delinking the help desk software and that IT asset management solution. I know that you did identify an open source solution which was carded to be evaluated by July of 2017. Can you give us an update on that?
Thank you for the question. The open source software that has been utilized, it's actually called Open Mint. This is something that was developed in Italy and is being used throughout Europe. We actually found out that it has been used in a public service environment in Italy. So far, we've implemented it, tested it at our archives division. It has proven to be useful, successful to some of the tests that it has been subjected so far. We had 3 key criteria that we were looking at, namely price. We also looked at the ability of the software to interface with IBM, Microsoft, and Oracle systems. And of course, whether it had been used in other public service environments, and as I said earlier, it has been. So it, being open source, it did meet the price criteria. Right? That was useful. What we saw is that, as I said, it has been installed at the National Archives for in-house assessment of its suitability. The initial assessment criteria have shown that it is able to handle consumables. However, it needs to be extended to the fixed assets. We are still doing testing, but it looks promising. I understand that that piece of software has also been used by our Presley Properties division in terms of recording, registering the property assets of the public service of the Ministry of Public Administration and Communication. So it looks useful, fruitful going forward.
Good, thanks for that response. So based on you being at the testing phase, do you have a timeline in terms of when the testing phase will be completed and a timeline in terms of implementation?
We believe that probably by the end of the first quarter of 2018, testing should be completed. But my information received also indicates that I believe the Treasury Division, through its IFMIS, whatever system we put into place has to be compatible with IFMIS, because you want to tie in inventory with financial management as well. So there's also that piece of the pie that we need to consider as well. But our in-house testing at the Archives Division should be completed by April 2018.
Thank you. Just one further question. You mentioned also in your response, in the ministerial response, liaising with relevant stakeholders in terms of to advise on the evaluation and the way forward. Right. Was that done?
To some extent, those relevant stakeholders, of course, would be the Treasury Division, Auditor General. We would have even needed to consult with iGovTT. So some of the discussions have taken place, but there's more to be done as the testing continues.
All right. Thank you very much.
Sure. Member Mark?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I'm directing this to the Comptroller of Accounts. First of all, let me compliment your division for issuing the circular, as we were advised a short while ago, and that dealt with the standardization of guidelines for inventory management and ultimate control, with the various elements outlined again earlier, making up this circular and guiding public officials. Would you care to advise us whether there has been a very important need to provide additional training for public officers in seeking to operationalize and implement those guidelines for inventory management control? Would you want to share with us what is the state of play insofar as training is concerned?
Yes. First of all, thank you for the compliment. Yes, I think that there is the need for additional training. We are looking at two options right now. We are looking at conducting some training using the controls and procedures set out in the circular between January to probably by March this year, bringing in all the ministries and training them on the procedures and controls as stated in the circular. We are also liaising with the Ministry of Public Administration on an inventory management course that they are looking to have take place this financial year as well.
May I also ask, as we deal with inventory management control, we did in fact identify that there existed some degree of or some limitations manifested in breaches to the Exchequer and Audit Act, as well as other financial regulations governing that whole arrangement would you care to tell us again what has been the efforts by the Ministry of Finance to look at this whole matter of amending the legislation and regulations so that the appropriate sanctions could be effected on those public officials that run afoul of the legislation as well as the regulations? That is the proposed amended legislation. Where are we with those matters?
Okay. Currently, no further amendments to the Exchequer and Audit Act have been made at this time. We are looking at various factors that need to be taken into consideration in crafting amendments to the Act. And one of it is the current public financial management reform initiatives taking place at the Ministry of Finance, as well as other reform initiatives such as the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Act. These reforms will have an impact on the role of the accounting officer. So we also have to take into consideration the directives of the consultancies in terms of what areas need to be reformed and what areas need to be changed, which would affect the roles of the accounting officers. As the reform initiative progresses, however, the ministry would be in a better position to be able to indicate with a degree of certainty what specific areas of the Exchequer and Audit Act need to be amended.
Finally, would you be in a position to indicate to this committee, given the urgency of the situation facing the public service and the various limitations outlined by the Auditor General in his various reports, do you want to share with us any anticipated time frame for, let's say, the reform process that is so crucial at this time to be speeded up so that in the not too distant future, many of the areas that we have identified could be addressed?
Well, there are various stages to the reform processes. For example, the internal audit reform would take between 1 to 2 years. The integrated system, it is anticipated that between 3 to 5 years, this would take place. But while this is happening, of course, legislative reform would be happening as well. And there's also the Public Procurement Act. I can't speak to the Public Procurement Act, but that also will have legislative changes in it.
Okay, all right, thank you. So I would really like to change the discussion a bit with respect to inventory control and a degree of vacancies. And particularly in terms of, I would like to direct the conversation to the Ministry of Public Administration and Communications. And my recollection is that in our last conversation, it was suggested that to deal with these vacancies, that contract posts be established. There was a lot of delay in the Ministry of Public Administration fulfilling these requests because of inadequacies in the submissions by the various ministries. Public Admin had indicated that they felt to cure the deficiencies that they would have embarked on sensitization programs, and a schedule was given. I think the last sensitization program was scheduled for July 20th, 2017, and this would have been to the Board of the Permanent Secretaries. So my first question to PMCD is whether the sensitization programs have taken place.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members. Thank you for the question. Yes, the sensitization sessions to the Board of Permanent Secretaries, the Deputy Permanent Secretaries, and the heads of human resource personnel have taken place in July and February. So the 3 sensitization sessions did take place this year, and we intend to continue these sessions. Say the next set should take place in early next year.
And I had noticed that after the sensitization in February, there was some indication that there was still some dissatisfaction, or let me don't use the word as strong as dissatisfaction, but there continued to be certain deficiencies in information being presented to support the creation of the post. And I wanted to ask whether that was as a result of not sufficient sensitization or not too clear a communication of what your demands were.
Okay, so Madam Chair and members, we would have realized that after the sensitization sessions, in agreement with what you're saying, yes, we have still received most of the draft notes that are coming to us do have omissions and pertinent information, you know, not coming forward to PMCD in a timely manner. And you're asking me what we are...
whether you've pinpointed, therefore...
The reason.
Yes, basically.
So we are of the view that the lack of information mostly is because of lack of proper record keeping at the ministries and departments, line agencies, and also lack of staff. We have some issues with vacancies. We also have the, we feel at PMCD that one of the reasons would be a lack of trained personnel in the HR units in terms of cabinet note writing, process mapping, collection of workload statistics, those kinds of things.
Have the observations you've made for these deficiencies, has this been communicated to the Public Service Academy for maybe their consideration for the design of courses to help alleviate these deficiencies that you all have noted?
We have not communicated that formally, no, but I believe I will do so because it's a good follow-up to ensure that the training, the HR units are trained. Yeah.
So the fact that you've done the circular and these deficiencies continue, has there been any improvement at all in your timeline and ability to fulfill all of these requests? Or are you still suffering from the considerable delays? Has there been a little improvement, no improvement at all?
Madam Chair, I would say no improvement at all. In terms of, generally speaking, we still wait on clients to submit the information for very lengthy periods.
Okay. So then, apart from the training, could it possibly be a sort of lack of clarity in your circular in terms of maybe steps need to be broken down a little further, maybe a review of the communication, the message needs to be considered?
Madam Chair, PMCD have always facilitated and communicated that to ministries that we are available and willing and have the necessary competencies and staff to assist ministries and departments in developing and submitting those pieces of information that we require. So we do communicate that with the clients, to the HR units. We also have samples and templates to assist the ministries in completing and submitting the information. And we also do process map one of the requirements being process mapping. We also assist ministries in doing their process maps, and we have done many presentations to ministries to show them and demonstrate how it is to be done. I believe that PMCD has made efforts and reached out to clients, and we continue to do so and will continue to do so to assist them in any way possible.
Might I ask, have you looked and see if there are among the ministries some more prone to be deficient than others, so that maybe your assistance could be more targeted to those who are more chronic ones with infractions?
We can do so, Madam Chair, but what we do when we receive requests for comments and reports from ministries and clients, we would contact when we receive them, we would send a memo to the client stating what information is missing, and we would also have a contact number, an email, and so on, so that the clients can contact us. And what would happen is, after a few days, the officers at PMCD would contact the ministry and follow up to get the information, and often they would offer assistance to say, okay, let's help you if you're having issues in coming up with the information and in preparing the information, in understanding, and so on. So, but we can definitely look and see if there's a pattern and concentrate on those clients, yes.
Thank you very much. Okay, so therefore, I think I would just like to move a bit to the Public Service Academy, based on just even the conversation that we just had with PMCD. In terms of, PMCD has identified certain sort of a pervasive issue in terms of ability to write notes and so on. Having learned this, is there a need for a formal process for you to consider some development of some program to cure the deficiency that PMCD just identified?
Madam Chair, firstly, I would like to say that the Public Service Academy, we are committed to our task of really developing public officers to ensure that they possess the capacity to really carry out their duties. The director, PMCD, as I recall, she mentioned some areas, but I know she spoke of cabinet note writing, and I think but business process for engineering. Don't know if I got it right. But in terms of the cabinet note writing, this particular program continues to be a continuous program on our schedule of activities. In fact, we have already conducted one, I think was it around November, cabinet note writing for public officers. That one is based on the assumption that the participants have little or no knowledge or experience in cabinet note writing, and it's a 5-day program which is highly what I would say practical, so they are given many instances to really write and develop notes. And in addition to that, there is a post-workshop where they are required to go back to their ministries, and it could be about 6 to 8 weeks later, really submit a note based on a given situation. Added to that, we have there's also a course, I should say, that speaks to that targets senior officers. It's called Cabinet Note Writing for Senior Officers. This one is for officers in their role to be able to vet notes, because as one moves up the ladder, they may not actually write the notes, but they are required to know what to look for to ensure that a note is effective, or what I can say is really sound. And that too that's a 3-day program. Actually, there is one planned for January. I don't have the dates in front of me, but I think within the next 2 weeks or so, that particular program is. And these programs are scheduled for more than once over the next fiscal. In fact, based on the
advice that we were given, and based on what is happening in the system, we have dedicated the first 3 months of this new fiscal to really focusing on the operational issues that confront ministries and departments, looking at the HR function, accounting, internal audit, and of course cabinet note writing. So once we get feedback, although we have a schedule of activities, once there's a dire need, we try to adapt our programs, because at the end of the day, we always remember why we are doing this. It's for the greater good, and it's to ensure that public officers do possess the skills necessary. Okay, thank you. In the last conversation we had, you had indicated that you were in a process of doing a needs analysis to come up with your schedule of activities. So I've heard you speaking about a schedule of activities for fiscal 2017-2018. So would I be correct in concluding that that was prepared after you had conducted your needs analysis?
Yeah, Chair, most certainly. The staff of the Academy did an in-depth needs analysis. We're using focus groups and questionnaires. And of course, we also look into, well, the policy areas, or we like to call it government policy agenda, to inform the activities. And we really spend a lot of time doing that. And we listened to what the ministries wanted. And based on that, we really developed our schedule of activities.
So in listening to the ministries, you would have listened to your own ministry.
Indeed, yes.
And therefore, how do I marry that with the issue identified by PMCD, which I think falls under your ministry too, in terms of the deficiency they see, which I think is a need? How do I marry that sort of disconnect?
Well, I would admit that there would have been some disconnect, because this needs analysis was done during June-July period of 2017. And the salient areas, the more, what I say, highly requested areas, these were the areas that informed our schedule of activities. So perhaps I would say that these areas perhaps wasn't highlighted, with the exception of the cabinet note writing perhaps. And what I'm saying, we are willing to have the conversations, and if it is that we need to include them, we would. But as I said, based on the information that was given, that's how we proceeded. So I'm not sure what happened there.
Let me ask something. Your schedule of activities, could you provide the committee with a copy of your schedule of activities? So this would not just only be programs, it would be also the time.
Yes.
Time, schedule time. Would it have capacity, like the number of people that you can, the cohort that you can capture?
Okay, we can include that,
okay.
But basically when we do it, we talk about the courses, the target group, and potential dates. But we can provide that information.
Okay, thank you. All right, so I want to just be a little more specific now in the conversation. You had indicated that there was supposed to be an inventory management course in September of 2017. Did it occur? This was, yes?
Yes, Chair. We had planned it, but it didn't come off as yet, because one of the challenges that we continue to face is really getting what I would say appropriate facilitators. The uniqueness of the public service, when we conduct training, we always want to ensure that the officers can really go back to their workplaces and really, as we say, hit the ground running. And in a lot of the functions of the public service, there's a certain uniqueness to it. And because of the dearth of facilitators, this has really hindered our ability to really conduct the course. But fortunately, we were able to make some progress with that. And for January month, we have the course Inventory Control and Management. And we have planned a meeting with the successful facilitator to fine tune, because we are about tailoring the course to the needs of the public service. And we have invited the Comptroller of Accounts to really be part of that meeting to ensure that the course really targets the areas, or the gaps, I should say, and some of the issues that were raised in the Auditor General's report.
So, you have a really soft voice, so I'm not hearing too well. So the issue identified was facilitators. At first I thought it was facilities, but it's facilitators.
Yeah.
Now, am I correct that this course was first scheduled for July 17 to July 19, 2017?
Yes.
So you had a specific date and time frame?
Yes.
And you didn't have a facilitator identified then?
Yes, we had someone, but based on some of the issues that were raised, in the Auditor General's report, we wanted to make this course more current. From the last sitting, we did talk about the course that we presently had and was conducted. But based on the information coming out and some of the issues, we saw the need to update that course to make it more relevant. And the person that was being used at that time, a retired public officer, the course perhaps was, some of the, we didn't think that it covered what we needed to address. And so we went about, expanding the pool to look to see if we can find suitable facilitators. That took some time, but we have finally chosen someone. Was a bidder was successful, and we see how it goes from there.
Okay, so what you had revised, your revision from July to September, you still found was inadequate. So that's why the course didn't come off in September.
September 2017?
Yes.
We were still looking at a facilitator. And based on the procurement, the new procurement legislation, we have to ensure that we comply with that. And based on all those factors, we saw the need to, go back out and to ensure that there's transparency. So that took some time.
All right, so it's now scheduled for what date you said?
January 9 to 11, 2018.
Okay, and how many ministries are you targeting?
Okay, how we do all the ministries. However, we intend to give, I would say, special considerations to some of the departments that were mentioned in, I think, the third report. I know there were probably one or two, I would say, departments that were mentioned there, so that's something.
Could you tell us who you're targeting? Because, it's almost January 9th.
You mean specific, you want the name of the ministries, that's kind of thing?
I'd like to know who you're targeting. Have they been notified? I take it you do have a facilitator and you do have a venue.
Yes.
Okay, so we would like to know, because as I said, we already in January, in my calendar. So who are these ministries that you're targeting? How do you intend to sensitize them, and so that they could be there?
Okay, usually the process is that a circular memo is issued, is sent to all ministries and departments, and they are invited to nominate suitable officers to participate in the program.
Yeah, but I understand, and my recollection might be not very accurate. But my recollection is that you had identified, look, you run courses, people don't come. Okay? You have areas, you don't get this sort of responses from ministries. But on the other hand, we hear ministries saying they lack training, or they submit names and the names
are not chosen, okay? So what you said is you're specifically tailoring this course to meet needs and challenges that you have identified. You've gone further. You said, look, in all the ministries, there are certain ones that are priority. All right, so who are these priorities? And in light of your experience, how do you get the people there? Apart from, because you've done that all before. It's the same thing. Circulars, people don't come. What additionally are you going to do to ensure that on the 9th and the 11th of January, you have the people there that you have identified that need to be there?
Okay, well, we have one of the departments that we have targeted specifically are the public officers and from the office of the president. Because I recall in one of the reports, they were mentioned as a department that needed training. So I've asked the HR advisor to really ensure that that department, they get the circular. Once they have nominated persons, based on that, what we would try to do is to give them, ensure that they get what I would say more than one space on the course, so that, you know, they can really participate. What we do, Madam Chair, is that we do repeat these courses frequently, and based on the responses that we get, if we see that the need it is to say, based on the responses, because that's what all we can do. All we can do in this instance is invite ministries to respond to the circular. Based on the responses that they have given, we would look at the forms, and based on their needs, we will see, okay, we will give priority to ministry X or Y. Okay. And once we keep repeating the course, others would...
Has the invitation gone out yet for the 9th to 11th?
Yes, they have.
They have gone out, okay. So you can always, I'm not going to stretch your memory, send us who you've targeted for this, to whom you have sent these responses, these invitations, and the date. I would just also like to ask about the fraud asset management course, which is something we spoke about on the last occasion that you were here.
Fixed asset management?
Fraud asset management course.
What I have here, what I have here, Chair, is fixed asset management. So
you could tell me about the fixed asset management course then?
Yes. Okay, so that is a new one that we have included based on, I said, what came out of the reports. This course is in the process of being designed. So somewhere around March 2018, we hope to really schedule. The course has been scheduled for March 2018. But as I said, it's in the design stages. We continue to liaise with the key stakeholders, namely Comptroller of Accounts, to ensure that whatever we design, as I said, it's relevant, and persons can really go back to their ministries and improve their processes. So it's still in the design stages.
Expect that by March you would have that finalized?
Yes.
And in terms of fraud and fraud policy design, do you have any courses with respect to that scheduled for this fiscal?
Not in terms of inventory, no.
Not in terms of inventory. No. In terms of anything with fraud?
Well, in terms of the internal audit function, yes. We're looking at some of the issues related to fraud, yeah.
And is that included in your schedule activities?
Yes, it is. And these two are in design stages, and we are liaising with the key stakeholders, Auditor General's Department.
And you expect your design to be ready, completed by when?
Well, I would say this would be completed the second half of the fiscal.
So that will be what, June? Or that's March?
Yeah, around May, June.
May, June, okay.
Yeah.
And do you include anything with risk management in your training? Do you have a schedule of activity?
Yeah,
Is that included in the
yes,
schedule?
we did include risk as well.
Okay, so that when we get the schedule, we'll
Yes,
see that.
when you will see those.
Okay, and let me ask, in terms of the inventory management course that's supposed to happen in January, did you liaise with the Auditor General's department to ensure that it is, as you say, up to date and current with the issues identified by them?
Yes, we have, and we continue to do it. So the liaising with them is continuous, and it's ongoing. We met with them, I think, around August or so to discuss the issues raised in the report. And as we designed this particular course, as I said previously, they have been invited to the meeting with the facilitator to ensure that the areas targeted are the correct ones.
Thank you very much. Member Mark?
Yeah. Thank you, Madam Chair. I wanted to raise the matter, and this deals with the whole issue of the central internal audit authority. I know that there was this commitment via the Ministry of Finance in collaboration with public administration and, of course, the Ministry of the Attorney General's Office to work towards the establishment of a central internal audit authority with the sole responsibility of overseeing the internal audit function across the entire public service. I don't know if the Ministry of Finance could advise us as to what is the state of play with this particular central internal audit authority.
That is one of the activities of the consultancy that we were speaking about. That is due to come on board probably by February 2018. One of the recommendations of the consultant in 2015 was the formation of a central internal audit unit to develop all the policies and procedures and oversee the internal audit function of ministries and departments.
So the consultancy, have we been able to recruit, or we are going to have the recruitment process completed in February of 2018? Where are we with the recruitment of the consultancy?
The bids were received in November of this year, and they are currently being evaluated. So by probably 2018 February, the contract for the consultancy should be signed. He should be hired.
But we were supposed to have the consultancy address sometime around last month. That took place. Mm-hmm. Did we begin the process or complete the process, or are we going to complete the process in February? Could you clear for us?
We will. They are looking right now at evaluating the responses that were received, so that process will be finalized by February.
Okay, so you haven't finalized that as yet. All right. Would you want to indicate to us also what kind of qualifications are we looking for as it relates to this consultancy? Have you worked out that?
Do you mean the qualifications of the consultant?
The consultant that you have to bring on board to help you establish and manage this exercise?
There was a unit that has been established in 2015, the Public Financial Management Modernization Unit, and that is headed by a coordinator. The coordinator is the one in charge of recruiting. He is in charge of all the reform initiatives and of doing the recruitment of these consultancies. So he would have been in charge of doing that process.
And then they would not have liaised with your department or division to at least keep you abreast of this development?
Yes, they always keep us abreast of where they are at, the stage that they are at the recruitment and selection.
Okay. So we expect this contract for the consultancy to be signed off officially by the end of February. That is what you're telling us?
Yes, it should be. Currently, as I said, they are evaluating right now.
Right, and the evaluation process should be completed by then?
Yes.
Okay. And any idea as to how long this contract would be in effect for?
Yes, it would be between 1 to 2 years.
1 to 2 years. Okay. All right. Well, that is an area that is of concern, and I'm glad to know that at least that is being addressed. Now, I also understand that there was, or should I ask, whether you have in your system today an internal audit charter? You have that document in existence? Do you have such a document?
Well, there is a draft internal audit charter that was produced by by a consultant 2 years ago. That charter has to be relooked. When the consultancy restarts, that charter has to be relooked with a view of finalizing.
Oh, so it's purely a draft?
Yes, it's a draft.
And then you also had an internal audit, some internal audit standards established by the previous consultancy in 2015 as well?
Yes, there were 3 documents. There was the internal audit charter, the internal audit practices guide, and the internal audit manual. These documents were circulated to permanent secretaries at the time. When the consultancy resumes, this will be the first order of business. They'll be looking at the relevant stakeholders and discussing these documents to have their comments and buy-in.
Okay. I don't know if the chairperson would have seen a copy of that circular that would have been issued by your department, the Comptroller of Accounts Department, seeking to standardize inventory management control mechanisms. Would you be kind enough to, forward a copy to our secretariat so that the committee would be apprised of the contents of that circular? Because I certainly haven't seen it, and I don't believe that members of this committee have had sight of this circular. Would you be kind enough to make it available to us?
Yes, we can send it in the morning.
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, thank you very much.
Member Oliver.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I would like to direct my queries to the Public Service Academy. In our previous discussion, when we looked at internal audit, one of the issues that we found to be pervasive was the competence or lack thereof of the staff staff assigned to internal audit duties. We understood that it is only the position of Auditor 3 that has a mandatory requirement for any specific training in audit. And one of the issues that most ministries and departments lamented was the limited availability of training being provided by the Public Service Academy to address that deficiency. And the Auditor General, I believe, also indicated that the limited training that was being provided was not done in consultation with them, so they were not sure about the adequacy of that training. Now, following our discussions the last time, I know that you've indicated that you've developed and designed about 9 new courses related to internal audit, so I must compliment you for that efficiency. Now, what I'd like to inquire, based on an earlier response, first I have to ask, do you have facilitators to conduct these courses? And if you do, have any of these courses been conducted to date? Or if not, well, how soon and with what frequency do you intend to start conducting these courses?
Member, firstly, I would like to say that in terms of the courses, we met with the Institute of Internal Auditors, or TNT chapter, and in our discussions with them, they provided, I say, guidelines as to some of the areas that would be deemed appropriate in order to, as it were, professionalize the audit stream, because presently, as it known, the present function is highly one of compliance. And so we sought the intervention of that professional body. And it's based on their recommendations, we shortlisted about 9 courses. Subsequently to that, we met with the Auditor General's Department, and we did bring it to the attention of the areas that we are proposing to move forward with, and they are certainly in agreement. Again, these courses are in the design stages, because this meeting took place, I think, the end of October, early November, right? End of October, early November, right? So it's still in the design stages. So we have given them the commitment that as we move forward in terms of, again, there's a procurement process that goes with all of this, that we would consult them in terms of we would get the opinion if it is the content areas or what would address the issues and that. So we are committed to liaising with them as we move forward. I don't want to call any names in terms of service providers, but again, for these new areas in terms of professionalizing the stream, again, we have challenges, because presently the only public officer in terms of the audit function, that is the auditor tree, who really would who possess any, what I can say, professional audit qualification. And in terms of the public service, they are few in number. I think you can count them in one hand, the number of positions. We have a challenge. So in terms of getting, say, like a retired auditor tree to really conduct this training, that has its limitations. The other option we have at this point in time is although it's available in terms of the financial situation that we're facing at this time, it is presenting a challenge. So what I would say, I have to talk with my principals to see how we could move forward, because for one thing that we are sure about, that it is needed. We do need it, it is essential, but at this point in time, the option available in terms of the cost of doing that is something we have to look at, because it's no secret in terms of the financial situation.
Okay, so I mean, essentially, the courses are well in the design phase, but you haven't been able to secure facilitators as yet for various reasons, yes, because of the cost content.
We are in that negotiating, trying to see how best we can negotiate, so that we can get something that's, I say, affordable.
One of the things I've noted from, your responses to previous question, is it that your first call for a facilitator would be a retired officer?
Well, in instances where, in instances where it's one of those areas, the functional areas in the public service, again, usually it's unique. The public service, there are certain things that are unique, that are inherent to the public service. So wherever it's possible that, especially in the, say, accounting, the auditing, those areas where there are retired public officers available, we usually they would be our first call, okay? Because usually many of them, they're more about giving back. Although they may charge, there's a cost to it, but you know, it's about giving back. And again, they would have that expert knowledge, having walked the path. Where that is not available, well, then we would seek alternatives. And as I said before, in these new areas, to professionalize the stream, with the exception perhaps of Auditor 3, I can be corrected, but my research is taking me that way. The skill or the knowledge is limited. So there are just few places we can go. As I said, I don't want to call names. There are just few options we have available, but at this point in time, you know,
If I may make a slight suggestion, given our government's call for volunteerism and the importance to the wider public on the efficiency and effectiveness of the public service, I may suggest that if you issue a call for a volunteer professional to come and give back some of their time, you may be surprised at the response that you might get. Just a suggestion. But one thing I want to note, now when the Ministry of Finance, under their Public Financial Management Modernization Unit and the roles of the consultant, I believe developing some sort of internal audit certification is one of the, is within the workload, the work program for the consultant. So given that you're developing some courses, I think when they get that consultant on board, there may be a need then for that consultant to have a review of the courses that you have developed in light of their role in putting together the internal audit charter and the audit standards as well. So just something for you and the Ministry of Finance to take note of going forward.
Okay, noted. Thank you. Member Antoine.
Good afternoon. The Personnel Department issued a policy on personnel performing duties outside of their area. And in November, they should have had discussions with the Service Commission about this policy. And this policy should have been circulated to the different ministries and departments in December. Could you tell us if this circular was, this policy was circulated, and what is the feedback so far reference this situation?
Yes, good afternoon. I need to say that the policy has not yet been circulated. We have had discussions with the Service Commission's department about the matter. Those discussions were held in November of this year, sorry. And while we have a draft document, we believe that there is need for some more discussions with other stakeholders because of the far-reaching nature of the policy being proposed. So we just want to make sure that we at least get the buy-in of some key stakeholders before we finalize that. We anticipate that we should be able to complete this, though, by the end of January of 2018.
So the draft policy will be completed by the end of January. But could you give me a time frame of when it will be circulated to the various ministry departments?
We have the draft policy at present. We want to hold some more discussions with stakeholders, including the Service Commission's department, with whom we held some discussions previously. We want to speak with them again, and a couple other stakeholders we'd like to liaise with before we finalize the policy and circulate it, disseminate it. Hopefully, we expect and schedule it by the end of January of 2018.
Okay.
Member Mark?
Thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Chair. As we are with the Chief Personnel Officer, may I continue to seek some clarification? We, under the whole issue of inventory or inventory control, we got a ministerial response from your department where there was need to fill as you would recall, a vacancy for what was described as an administrative officer. You recall that, right? And the letter that we got was dated around December the 5th of this year. Now, the first thing I would like to ask on behalf of the committee, has this particular vacancy been filled?
The vacancy has not yet been filled, member.
But could you tell us why? Why has the vacancy not been filled, particularly, Mr. CPO, when we take into account we are looking at a 7-month period between May of this year to December the 5th. Why has it taken so long? What are the difficulties or challenges you have faced or you are being faced with to fill this vacancy?
Yeah, certainly. With respect to filling of vacancies, I think that the chair and members would recognize that the personnel department is a receiver of a particular service in this particular regard. And we have been having discussions with the agency, sister agency that provides the service in terms of the recruitment and selection process. And those discussions have not yet been finalized, but I think the answer would really lie in the difficulties around that particular category of staff throughout the public service. There has been, in other words, because of the high mobility, and I think I may be speaking a bit for the commission, but there's a high level of mobility among that category of staff. And so it's not always easy to fill those particular positions. But so I can't really give you precise reasons and say, well, we haven't filled because of this, because we are working along with the Service Commissions Department in trying to fill it. But there have been challenges in filling, in finding the suitable persons.
Would you want to share with us, given those challenges, any particular time frame when that need that you identified would be satisfied, given the discussions you're having with the Service Commissions Department?
Yes, certainly. What I can say about that is that, and I'll share a little bit in terms of the strategy, or the difficulty, I should say. We hope to fill the position by the end of January, again, because it would not necessarily be with the kind of, it would not be an ideal situation, but we will have to compromise with respect to the level and so on of staff which we would have to place in a position. In other words, there's a dearth of persons to fill with the required qualifications and experience to fill the positions. And in seeking to obtain the appropriate or suitably qualified personnel, that has been a challenge. But because there's a need to fill, we will proceed to go with the next best alternative.
Thank you very much. I hope that you would be able to have that vacancy satisfied, as you said, the end of January. Now, the question of policy, you have a particular policy that you spoke about as it relates to staff performing tasks outside of their job descriptions. You remember we were talking about that when we last met, and you did give an undertaking that your department would develop or formulate a particular policy to address that matter. Has that policy been developed and has it been circulated?
Remember, the policy hasn't yet been circulated, but there's a draft document, and we have had discussions with the Service Commissions Department on this, and we are seeking to hold further discussions with them as we seek to finalize, to refine the policy position and to circulate it by the end of January of 2018. That's the proposed approach which we are taking.
By the end of January of 2018?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I want to ask, I think this might be appropriately asked to the PS of the Ministry of Finance. In terms of IFMIS, would that also be rolled out to the state enterprises sector?
Chair, I would like to defer to the Controller of Accounts on this.
Thank you.
It would be rolled out to ministries and departments.
So the state enterprises sector would be included? Yes or no?
No.
No. Is that desirable, though, to have the state enterprises sector operate under the IFMIS system?
Yes, but the rollout at first would be to ministries and departments, and well, I cannot say right now if there's an intention to roll out to the state enterprises.
So when you mean at first, you mean so far all that has been considered is the ministries and the departments. All right. So let me just ask a little further about the IFMIS, because are you still at the stage of awaiting the IADB feedback?
Yes.
Is that likely? When is that likely? Do you know?
Possibly anytime soon.
Anytime soon.
Yes.
So would I be correct in saying that maybe by about April 2018, the system should be functional in the 4 pilot ministries?
No. By April 2018, we would have a vendor on board for the purchase and installation of the IFMIS. The IFMIS itself, to have that rolled out, would take probably about 3 years to 3 years.
So just help me, because maybe I misunderstood this report on the status of the implementation. You've already done the evaluation?
Yes.
Yes?
Yes.
And therefore you're waiting the feedback from the IADB on what? On your evaluation committee report?
The report of the evaluation committee would have been submitted to the IDB for non-objection. After that happens, then we have to look at finalizing the contract for the potential vendor. After the vendor is hired, which could be probably February 2018, then the whole process of acquiring the hardware and software for the IFMIS will begin.
So then, could you give me a time frame that you, and I understand it'll be a sort of guesstimate, where you would have it operational in the 4 pilot ministries?
2019. Could be 2019.
2019. So at best, you would say that the IFMIS will be fully functional maybe 2021.
Yeah, yes. Because it really takes 3 to 5 years to fully implement an IFMIS.
Yes, and the 3 to 5 years starts with your procurement of the hardware and software.
Yeah, yes, it starts after the procurement.
Okay. All right, so that in the meantime, what is happening to improve your whole financial management system?
Well, in the meantime, we also have accounting reform that is taking place. We have various reform initiatives. One of it is accounting reform, and that is also under the IDB loan, where we would have another consultant coming in to look at the business process reengineering and changing the accounting structure, looking at the functions of the accounts, and seeing where we need improvements in the accounting reform.
So let me ask you another question. So would I be correct in saying that in your implementation of IFMIS, you're somewhat behind your original schedule?
Somewhat. Yes, slightly.
Yes? And might I ask what would have caused that?
Well, the main thing that would have pushed this back, it was the IDB loan that we were awaiting a signing of an IDB loan that was eventually signed. When that was done, the procurement started this financial year. The procurement had started.
When you asked that, because I think we understood that, but I believe, and I might be wrong, we would have got a report dated the 22nd of December from the Ministry of Finance with respect to a status of implementation. I don't know if you have that. Okay, which, if I understood it clearly, I would have thought that your total rollout would have been about 2 years earlier than this 2021 date. So that is the sort of time lag I'm talking about, and the reason for that time lag. Because today is December 28th, so this is six days ago.
Yes, well, that was how long the procurement process has taken. I know that this is almost at the end. The vendors should be on board soon.
Yeah, but really I'm asking what happened, what changes took place between the date of this report on December 22nd and today, December 28th, that we're now talking of a 2-year delay. So it's either I misread what you sent, or this doesn't reflect properly where you are at.
I'm not sure what you are speaking about, but this report would have been sent from the permanent secretary.
Okay, what I'll do, Ms. Liban, I think in all fairness, I'll ask the Secretariat to just pass a copy to you, and then we can continue on this discussion. Okay? In the meantime, I just want to ask the Head of the Public Service, Mr. Sweet, in terms of the earlier discussion and the deficiencies that was pointed out with PMCD with writing of cabinet notes, etc., etc. As the head of the public service and
Deputy head.
No, yeah, no, I mean the head of the permanent secretaries and the board of permanent secretaries. Thank you. Do you see yourself in having a role with respect to an issue like that?
Thank you, Chair. In terms of the role that the Permanent Secretary Prime Minister would play, is really in terms of coordinating the efforts among the various ministries and departments. So when we have discussions at the level of the board, a lot of these issues would be raised by individual ministries and departments, and we would have the presence of, well, of course, Ministry of Public Administration, as well as the DPA and the CPO at that meeting. And in terms of certain critical matters, if it come to the fore, what we may do is form like a subcommittee to address these matters. I think, well, based on the discussion that I would have had this afternoon, we'll have to have probably some discussion after this meeting on this matter, because what we may find is that, okay, if the Public Service Academy goes out to different ministries and departments, and I ask them for their feedback on where they identify as their critical areas, there probably needs to be some distilling of the responses, because the responses from the stakeholders may not be the same perception of the central ministries. For instance, if persons are not familiar with process mapping, etc., and you get that feedback coming from PMCD, But the individual ministries and departments, they may have other priorities that don't include. So I think we need to have probably some discussion at the level of the PSs and for input in territorially coordinate and distill, because you can't really do like a popular count to determine what it needs, and so we have to take some further action coming up.
So when is your next meeting?
Our next meeting is scheduled for the 3rd Thursday in January.
So would this be something that would make your agenda?
Well, yes, I've been taking some notes from this meeting, and I think as well, apart from that, I think we need to probably have the Ministry of Finance give some feedback to the rest of the board in terms of what's happening in terms of financial management reform.
Thank you very much. And I know earlier we touched on infractions regarding the audit, the Exchequer and Audit Act. And there was, in your response from the Ministry of Finance, a sort of view that there would be discussions with the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs with respect to drafting amendments to include sanctions for public officials who breach the Exchequer and Audit Act and the financial regulations in accordance with best practice. And I want to know if such discussions have in fact been had, and if they have been, you know, where they're at. Yes, I put that to the Permanent Secretary of the Ministry of Finance.
Thank you, Chair. The discussions have not yet started. The sanctions that exist right now in law are in the procurement legislation, and that we envisage that there has to be some harmonization in the two pieces of legislation to incorporate any sanctions that has to take place. That has not taken place as yet, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, so there are sanctions in the procurement legislation which has not yet been proclaimed.
Correct, Chair.
Okay. Would these sanctions, when the legislation is proclaimed, would these sanctions cover all instances of breach by public servants in terms of things like inventory control?
As far as I can tell, Chair, the sanctions would be in relation to non-observance of sections in the procurement legislation.
So that, therefore, I mean, I don't want to really carry into too technical an aspect, but in terms of the harmonization that you speak of, that needs to take place in terms of the procurement legislation and the Exchequer and Audit Act, what then would be required?
In terms of regulations, in terms of procedures, where the regulations and the Exchequer and Audit Act in terms of stores conflict with the areas in the Exchequer and Audit Act.
We expect that sometime soon that the procurement legislation would come into force. Therefore, when would the discussions take place for this harmonization and for the amendments to be drafted for your Exchequer and Audit Act? When are they likely to take place?
As soon as the regulator who is to be appointed makes recommendations to the Minister of Finance, regulations would be proposed, and the harmonization would take place at that point.
So the whole thing is being delayed by the non-appointment of a procurement regulator?
Correct, Chair.
All right, thank you very much. And then maybe I could go back to Ms. Laban. I don't know if you've got the document as yet. Yes, so as I said, maybe it's a misunderstanding by me of the sort of timelines that are set out here. But I have calculated based on what this is, that mid-2019, in accordance with your timeline, would be an expected date. I'm now hearing 2 years later, so I'm just asking for clarification.
Yes, well, we would have to go with what the Permanent Secretary had indicated. April 2018. You had the firms were shortlisted in April 2017, and you also have a 4 to 5 year period for it to be fully operational. Right. Now this would be the more up-to-date version what the PS had sent.
So, the implementation of IFMIS and this whole program, is this being done by the Controller of Accounts or by the Ministry of Finance?
It would be by the Ministry of Finance under the PFMMU unit that was established for that purpose.
Okay, so that the questions, maybe I should not have directed to you. Maybe I should direct it to the PS of Finance.
Yeah, and the coordinator of the unit would have answered, could have answered.
PS of Finance, assist us, please.
Chair, if I may, could we be afforded the opportunity to reconcile the difference that is being presented here at this meeting, and could we come back to you, please?
So that I would appreciate if we could get this in writing.
Of course.
And I would think about January 8th, that's a working day. Should be sufficient time. I think that should be the first working Monday in January.
Yes.
Okay?
Yes,
Thank you
sir.
very much. All right, so, Member Mark.
Yes, I just want to revert to the CPO on a particular matter. And we were told that you had some limitations in establishing a properly functioning internal audit unit. And you were supposed to liaise with both the Auditor General's Department as well as the Comptroller of Accounts to provide you with some guidance and support. And you did indicate in your response that you had meetings with the Auditor General and the Ministry of Finance. Could you share with this committee the outcomes of your meetings or consultation on this very important matter, and where are you and the personnel department with a properly functioning internal audit unit?
Thank you, Member. We did, in fact, have discussions with the Comptroller of Accounts, the Treasury Division. In fact, we sought their assistance because I think, I don't think we are singular with regard to the need to establish more appropriate and effective auditing systems within the internal systems within the public, within the Ministerial Department. However, based upon the promptings of this committee, we would have sought the assistance of the Comptroller of Accounts. They, in fact, met with us. They brought in a team, and they worked with us for some time. But they focused more on the accounting systems, because that's part of their particular modus operandi, right? Having said that, though, based upon our own discussions, which we were having in an attempt to revised the job descriptions for the internal audit function, we ourselves were getting more knowledge about the function itself, and we were able to make some contact with a particular a prospective vendor to assist us in moving the process forward as far as setting up a proper system for internal audit. So we have, in fact, we were able to develop our own internal audit charter and program with the help of Comptroller of Accounts personnel, as well as with the assistance of someone external to the public service at this point in time. We hope to have training conducted next year to assist our auditors in developing a more appropriate program. So I think we have made some progress as far as the development of a more effective internal audit function in the department.
The services, you did indicate that you had acquired the services of a provider to assist you in training. I noted that you are working with the Public Service Academy, and that there's some working paper that you're not going to be using to conduct training in January of 2018. Am I correct?
In part, member, I think to a large extent, what we hope to do is to cash in on the programs which the as I was saying, member, what we hope to do is cash in on the programs which are scheduled to be run by the Public Service Academy in January, and I think of in April of 2018. But in addition to that, we have identified a prospective provider to do our own internal training so that we will be approaching it from both fronts.
Would you care to share with us how many members of staff are expected to benefit from this training from the provider that you have identified?
I would say approximately 12 persons, because we are targeting both the internal audit staff, which has a complement of 2 persons, as well as our accounting units and our HR units, specific persons there.
Would you want to share with us as well what will it cost your personnel department to recruit this provider? And could you share with us what is the period of time this provider would be recruited for?
Thank you, member. Member, with your leave, I would prefer if it were possible for me not to discuss this in open forums such as this one. We are still in negotiations with the prospective provider, and I wouldn't want to divulge that particular cost information.
I think that the chair would facilitate your request, but we would certainly appreciate in writing the submission of the final outcomes, so at least the committee would be aware of the name of the provider and the cost to your department for the provision of the provider's services, and the period of time that the provider would be engaged for in the provisioning of those services.
Certainly, member, we'll be happy to share that information once the discussions have been concluded successfully.
Well, I would imagine that if you have a time frame, as you have identified, and you have a targeted audience of a minimum of 12 persons who would benefit from this training, and you're looking at January of 2018, and today's the 28th of December, you have to be rushing along to at least conclude those negotiations with this particular provider. So I would really want to proffer that in short order, you would have concluded on that matter and therefore provide this committee with the required information.
Okay, so that I would like to direct some questions to the Service Commission Department. And the Service Commission Department, in response to the recommendation of this committee to provide a status update on the efforts made in the filling of vacancies in the internal audit units by November 30th, 2017, provided to the Parliament a table outlining the vacancies that exist in the audit stream and the status of those offices. I don't know if the table is in the possession of the representative from the Service Commission Department. And it's just for the purposes of lending some clarification to us, and I've just taken out a couple as a sample. So if I look at the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs, and say for instance under Auditing Assistant, where the number of offices are 3, the number of vacant offices 1, the number of acting incumbents 0, the number of offices without bodies. And then we are told in remarks the substantive holders of the office are acting in higher office. Could that be explained so that we can get some clarification, please?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I am sure the DPA has this information prepared for you.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. Yes, we would have submitted this table. Well, the topic here was the filling of the internal audit vacancies. Now, what I want to say at the outset is that the filling of vacancies entail a lot of research, because when we appoint or promote persons to offices, these are permanent pensionable offices. So we do have to do very in-depth research before we promote. In terms of the internal audit, what we try to do is to ensure, even though a post is vacant, we try to ensure that there is an incumbent in the office, whether it's a temporary person or an acting incumbent. For the Attorney General's office, there is 1 office without body, and as you said, the auditing assistant, what this means is that there are 3 offices of auditing assistant. 1 is vacant, so it means there are 2 that are filled. There are no acting incumbents as yet. The substantive holders of those 2 other offices, they are acting in the higher office. So what is missing from this column is that they also require 2 auditing assistants to act, and we are currently looking to get persons to act in those offices.
Okay, so number of offices without bodies. Sorry. Number of offices without bodies. Right. Should something be there or not?
Yes, there should be 2.
There should be 2.
Yes.
Okay. Which are the ones who are acting in higher?
Yeah. Yes.
All right. Okay, so let's go to Agriculture, Land and Fisheries, Auditing Assistant.
All right, so there are 5 officers. Those are established officers, 2 temporary officers. Now, for temporary officers in the public service, they have a lifespan. In this case, these temporary officers, they expired in 2015. The ministry has indicated to us they are going to seek approval to extend these temporary offices. The other offices of auditing assistants, well, of course, they are permanent officers, but they are not scheduled traveling officers. And these are one of this ministry, it's difficult to get persons to go to this ministry because the offices are not scheduled. So we have 2 offices there that we need bodies for.
So those will be offices, and then you need 2
right.
Temporary.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, until those officers are extended.
So the number of officers without bodies would be what?
2.
Okay. And therefore, really, 2 officers without bodies and 2 temporary.
Right, so but we have to await the extension of those officers before we put them.
Really and truly, you're looking for 4?
Yes, but 2 initially.
All right, so let me ask something, and I don't know which is the relevant agency. It seems that in filling the internal audit posts, sometimes people decline promotion because, as you say, it's not scheduled or it doesn't have traveling. Or is that allowed by the regulations to decline?
Well, persons are within their right to decline a promotion. We have tried in the past in terms of the acting appointments where we would ask persons before if they are interested. The commission has made a decision and said do not ask if they're interested, just give them the appointment and whether they accept or refuse. So the commission has been approving appointments, but persons are still refusing the appointments.
So therefore you're still left with a vacancy?
Yes.
Has the commission looked at any way to address that?
Well, what we have been doing at the SCD itself, and the chairman has asked us to look at it, we had never collected that type of information before, so this is the first time you are seeing it here. Service Commission Department is not really interested in what is a scheduled traveling post or not. So we have, these last couple of months, we have gone to ministries and departments and asking which ones are scheduled. So to get an idea where persons would not go. So take, for example, you have an auditing assistant who is in a traveling position, and the person is in line for promotion to an auditor 1. If that post is vacant, we may promote the person. But if that office is not a scheduled traveling office, that person is not going to take it up because they may have gotten a motor vehicle loan that they need to repay. They would have gotten an upkeep allowance, so the compensation is going to be less. So they would not accept it. We do not schedule officers. That is the personnel department, they would do that, and based on the ministries and the requirements of the officers. So we are stymied to some extent because it's only where the vacancies are and whether they are traveling officers or not, we will look to promote. So this time around we are going to try, but it may not work out how we would like it to work out.
If I understand, it's a question of money or
for the individual
incentive, right? So my question is, and I don't know, maybe the head of the permanent secretary, I don't know if it's CPO, I don't know. Has there been any sort of consideration amongst you all? How do we address this? Because it's a pervasive issue. It's always going to be, nobody's going to take a promotion if they're going to end up with less money. How do we address this? If you say the regulations allow me to not take the promotion.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll attempt to answer. With respect, I think what the DPA said is going along the right track to begin with, which is to collect data. Why are people refusing promotions? You needed data. We don't have enough data. Very often, we have had to respond to questions which this committee has asked. And often, the signal seems to be pointing towards compensation. But we know from our own experience and from the literature that it's not always about compensation. So I think getting the data is the first step. With respect to the issue of scheduling in particular, which is the construct which we currently have in relation to providing some remuneration for a traveling officer, right? Now, we utilize, if there's no need for traveling, it would not be appropriate for us to make a post a scheduling post so that someone can receive a promotion. So you really have to look at both the we have to get the data from service commissions, and we need to look at the specific positions and make some determination as to whether, in fact, the position requires traveling, and we can then fast-track those particular ones. I don't know if that answers the question, Madam Chair.
No, I understand what you're saying. I'm just wondering if within your authority, whether as a PS, whether from the CPU perspective, if there are legitimate ways to at least cure the monetary side. If it is that, let's say, for instance, in the Parliament, people are paid a duty allowance, okay, because if we sit in, okay. So I'm just wondering if there are creative ways which can be explored.
If I may, I know in the past there have been some attempts to address the issues of compensation, particularly for certain classes of individuals like auditors in the Ministry of Energy, IT personnel, etc. And what has happened in the past is that once one class of individuals or a case is made for one, then you got other requests coming forward. And eventually, after a certain amount of time, you got a sort of, I wouldn't say a pushback, but the response was that we couldn't continue to do this on an ad hoc basis, and you really needed to have an overall approach in looking at compensation. And I know, well, currently the personnel department is looking at a compensation by doing the job evaluation exercise. But the issue that you're going to continue to have in the public services, because ministries and departments are not closed and persons move from one ministry to department, these sort of issues will continue in my opinion, to continue to arise. For instance, within the Office of the Prime Minister, you would have had an internal audit department that worked for the Office of the Prime Minister, and therefore you didn't need traveling. But when you realign the portfolio and included child and gender affairs, you suddenly need traveling. So you have to go through the process now of scheduling the traveling posts. Now, if later down the line, the ministry is realigned, and that is no longer part of the ministry, you may have persons who are in a traveling post that don't need to travel. And so because you continue to run an HR system across such a wide and diversified public service, you're always going to have these issues. So, I mean, we have to continue to look at it, but it's a challenging prospect to look at.
So, do we agree no end in sight?
No, I think what I hinted that the personnel department is looking at the compensation throughout the service. And I think that some of these matters would be addressed in that exercise because, for instance, the Internal Audit Department, as you do the financial management reform, and the whole job description and qualifications, etc., what you need for internal auditor would change, and of necessity, the compensation package would have to be addressed. But so I'm not seeing a solution in the immediate future, but as the compensation exercise continues and unfolds, I think we can have a solution on the horizon.
What I'd say is I'd agree to accept what you say. We'll find more questions, but for now, I think we will let that rest because I don't know that it is something that you all find desirable to continue indefinitely. Let me just ask this, in terms of Public Service Academy and the training that you had said about for internal auditors. I get the impression from some of the ministries that we've examined that the role of the internal auditor, the function, is not really appreciated. So while we might be training people in that function, is there anything done to address a wider appreciation of the role and the importance of the internal auditor?
Well, you mean to other stakeholders, Chair?
To the wider public service, because we've met a lot of instances where the internal auditor makes certain recommendations, they're ignored, or they are scheduled on other desks doing other functions. And therefore, it appears that there is a lack of appreciation. We're not talking now about an internal auditor not being qualified or not. We're talking about within a ministry, the appreciation of the role, function, and importance of an internal auditor. Is there any sort of training being contemplated to address that?
Well, at this point, I can think that perhaps that could be part of an, what you call an induction program, whereby the whole key functions of the public service that exist in the public service are examined. So if that induction is part of the, when I say part of the ministry strategy, I can see that some of the key offices, whether it's the Auditor General's Department, the internal audit function, the HR function, all those things they are brought, put on the front burner. I think that is a step in the right direction.
Is there a role for your academy with respect to understanding and appreciation by the wider public service?
I think that is something that can be examined.
Yes, Mr. Sweet, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I wanted to come in and say that the internal auditor really reports to the accounting officer, and it's for the accounting officer to understand the role of importance. And once the accounting officer really appreciates and understands and empowers the internal auditor, then I think from there the rest of the staff will follow. And I wanted to add that within the recent past, the Comptroller of Accounts have been having regular discussions with permanent secretaries and heads of departments dealing with accounting systems and the role of the internal audit.
Because I was about to say then it comes back to you. All right, and just some follow-up questions again for the academy. In terms of, you had listed that you're going to do training in audit report writing, assessing risk, ensuring internal audits value, risk-based auditing, a value-added proposition, fundamentals of IT auditing, auditing charge tools and techniques, beginning auditor tools and techniques, and so on. Have any of those courses been run as yet for this fiscal?
In terms of the audit report writing, the ensuring internal audits value, which we're proposing to rename risk-based auditing based on the research. There are some of these programs here that are already part of our schedule of activities. However, this, as I mentioned previously, this meeting was held somewhat towards the end of October and early November, so that some of the new areas, if I can say, that were suggested, we would have to really include them. But things like the audit report writing, risk-based auditing, the beginning auditors tools and techniques, we call it fundamentals of internal audit, fundamentals of the internal audit function, but it's the same sort of thing. There are some of those areas that are already being looked at.
All right, so of those 9 courses, could you therefore highlight in response to us which have been scheduled? Okay, and you'll give us that in writing.
Put it in writing.
All right, and I just wanted to ask about the institutional strengthening project, which ended in March 2017. if I'm correct, and I think this is to the Service Commission's department, and I wanted to find out if they began implementing any of the recommendations arising from that institutional strengthening project report.
Yes, Madam Chair. In 2017, March 2017, the project came to an end with the consultants being there. One of the main recommendations we did so far, and that happened this year, so is creating a professional series at the Service Commission's Department for Human Resource Advisors rather than Human Resource Officers. Cabinet agreed to that in December, and we implemented it this year. So we had a bit of a transition in terms of moving persons, and that was one of our main areas. Now, the other area is the electronic, the EDMS. That, up to last week, we signed a letter of engagement, and the RFP should be published early next year. Those are the two main items that we focus on this year. But in terms of the staffing at the Service Commission Department, where we want to professionalize, that has been one of the main focus. We are continuing with our training at the Service Commission Department for these officers. We also advertise the officers, so even though the incumbents, they will be allowed to apply. We are currently we did an examination, so we have a supplemental examination coming up soon. So we should start our selection process early next year. So that should settle and stabilize the Service Commission Department for a little while rather than closing it in a bit. So we won't have the fluidity of the HR, the human resource officers moving in and out of the department.
And how would this affect the overall public service?
Well, in terms of, we hope in the long run we will have a more efficient service to the public service as a whole, because when you professionalize, you ramp up your service as one, and in terms of advising, you need persons to properly advise ministries and departments in how they do things. It's just we hope it's not going to happen in the immediate, but in the medium to longer term, because as I said, these persons have to undergo training, and they all have to become familiar with our regulations, our policies, our procedures in terms of how we do things. And that should happen within the next 2 to 3 years. So we are hoping for a more efficient and effective Service Commission Department which would serve the public service.
In the next 2 to 3 years?
Yes.
Okay, let me ask, are there any other recommendations that you all intend to implement coming out of the institutional strengthening project?
There are several. As I spoke, one of it,
the two.
Foundation is leveraging technology, and the EDMS is going to take us a long way, because right now we have a manual record system with almost 200,000 files. So as you can tell, based on that, it's very difficult to manage. The scanning project has been going on for the last couple of years, so we are just waiting on that software to convert, and that should bring us a sense of relief to the department in terms of records, but we continue with that. The other one, we have a mentoring program, which we started also in terms of mentoring different levels of staff. So staff with experience at the Service Commission's Department, they have identified persons who are willing to take on that mentorship. So we have that also in train. We started with our filling of vacancies in 2016. We did have some progress in the vacancy reduction. I think we completed about 3,200 in 2016. Because of the staff movements in 2017, we had a bit of a slowing down, but in 2018, we should start back again when the Service Commission has settled. In terms of the restructuring of the units, we are working with the PMCD. We have had several meetings, and they have given us the assurance that they are going to work closely with us to continue. They had started with us a couple of years ago prior to the institutional strengthening, So there was a structure which we implemented part of, but with the institutional strengthening and the recommendations, we have to relook, not to a large extent, but to some extent, to strengthen some of the units, in particular our monitoring and oversight, because if the Commission chooses to delegate more of its functions, and which in principle it has agreed to, the monitoring will come into play. So we do have a monitoring unit, and they do go to ministries and departments. We have increased the staff to some extent, but in working with the PMCD, we have to increase at least that unit for the time being. It was also recommended a project unit, and again with PMCD, we are also working on that.
Thank you. Are there any more questions? Okay, Member Huggins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. In terms of the electronic database management system, I know you said that scanning and so forth is ongoing, but you have a time frame in terms of, or timeline in terms of when that is to be completed? And can you, just for clarity, outline how this will benefit or assist in filling these vacancies and making those activities more efficient?
Okay, as I said before, we have over approximately 200,000 files of officers because it's the entire public service we have files on. In doing any appointments and promotions, we look for files. We have to use the files. The person's personal file, or what we call general files, and sometimes they can be misplaced or difficult to get to. You have other people using it at the same time. There may be other persons, so the file could be anywhere within the building or even at our other offices across the street from the head office. The EDMS, we would have gotten cabinet approval a couple of years ago, but the funds were never allocated. The funds were allocated in 2015 fiscal. The amount was not sufficient, but we did in 2016 restart our scanning project, and we continue now. In current fiscal, we got money under our PSIP program, so we are going full steam ahead to get our software and hardware to continue with the EDMS.
So should the funding be available?
Mm-hmm.
What is the timeline in terms of estimation?
Well, when we started, the timeline was 5 years. So we start from 2015 to 2020. We didn't really start in 2015, so I would go to 2021. Because the number of files, and then remember, we have to update the files as we go along.
There's one more question. You identified that 3,200 vacancies will have been filled in 2016, am I correct?
Yes.
And I believe there was a target for 1,500 vacancies by June 30th, 2017.
Yes, we did have a target, but as I said, because we changed our staffing structure from the human resource officers to the human resource advisors, we had to do a bit of recreation in terms of our units and restructuring, so that has slowed down the process. Our target probably for this year might be, the entire year might be 1,500. We are just computing the final figures because the Commission at its last meeting earlier this month, we would have to just compute that lot to get the total figure.
Member Mark.
Yes, I'm the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Finance. The integrated financial management information system. We know that what you have said and what have been submitted to us represents an element or a strand of the overall public management, public financial management reform process. Could you tell me and tell us here whether that would also lead to a shifting from the cash-based accounting system to the accrual accounting-based system, would that mechanism that we have been exposed to, the integrated financial management information system, would that entail that shift from this cash-based to an accrual-based accounting system in the Republic of TNT within the public service?
Yes, thank you, Member. The Comptroller can take that question. Thank you.
Yes, it has the ability to do, it would have the ability to do accrual accounting. The intention is to go accrual accounting from cash base, but on a phased basis.
No, I'm asking specifically whether that is one of the elements in that system that we are seeking to bring into effect between 2 and 4 years from today. Is that going to be an integral part, or is it going to just be an accidental part of that exercise? And is the Ministry of Finance committed to really proceeding from a cash-based system of accounting to an accrual-based system of accounting? Would it require a separate system, or would that system that we are seeking to introduce, that will certainly cost a lot of money to the taxpayers, would that be an integral element in that reform process? That's what I'm trying to get from you.
Yes, that is one of the functionalities of the system. It has the ability to move towards accrual accounting, so it would no longer be cash basis as we are accustomed to. Right?
My final concern, again, to the Ministry of Finance Permanent Secretary, and even to the Permanent Secretary in the Office of the Prime Minister, we would all agree that we are in somewhat an emergency situation, even bordering on crisis, as it relates to the breakdown in internal controls within the public service. And this is being manifested every year when the Auditor General submits his report on the financial state of affairs in our country. And Mr. Sweet earlier said that a good accounting officer, right, would be able to liaise with this internal auditor and at least provide the necessary inspiration and incentives for that person to continue to do his work without let or hindrance. That is what I heard him to be saying. But this matter involving the breakdown in internal controls has been happening for the last 10 years. And the role of the Ministry of Finance in this exercise, I am wondering to what extent there is any serious concerns coming from the Permanent Secretary part of that ministry, as well as the head of the public service, liaising with the Controller of Account, to find a solution to that matter before we took it up at the level of this Joint Select Committee. Has there been any efforts, Madam Permanent Secretary, made in the past to arrest this crisis that we see manifested every year in the Auditor General's report? That is the complete weaknesses that the Auditor General outlined in his report as it relates to the internal audit function. Every year for the last 10 years, there is almost a ritual in terms of a repeat over and over. And that is why the chairman was asking, listen, there are difficulties in filling vacancies, but what can we do? What have been done in the past to try to stem this major challenge? I'm trying to get some clarification from the Permanent Secretary and maybe Mr. Sweet himself.
Yes, member. We do agree that the internal audit function has broken down over the years. It has been an area that has been neglected, under-resourced, not only in terms of providing financial support, but in terms of the skills. We see that the requirements of the human resource to function in that unit in an internal audit has not been up to international standard. And the whole system has not functioned as best as it should. In addition to which, as PS Suite has said, I think management has not recognized the value of the internal function in our particular organizations. In fact, the internal audit function is supposed to provide us with that sort of consultancy assurance that we need that our systems can stand up to scrutiny. The efforts that the Treasury has made in the past may have, I would admit, would have gone wanted. The consultancy that was presented, we probably did not give it the appropriate attention in terms of commenting on their reports. I don't know if it's, again, a matter of us not recognizing the importance of the function, but we in the Ministry of Finance have committed to giving this function the attention that is required for the sake of the accountability and transparency of the resources, particularly in this time where we see that we cannot account for various assets that we may have procured. And the commitment is, there's a renewed commitment to the Ministry of Finance and an effort to really accelerate and to give focus to the internal audit function in the public service.
Yeah, I'm okay, thanks. Thanks, yeah. Okay, so that I would like at this stage to bring this meeting to an end. I want to thank the various representatives here present, the Permanent Secretary in the Office of the Prime Minister, the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Finance, the Assistant Auditor General, and the other representative from the Auditor General Department, the Controller of Accounts, the Deputy Controller of Accounts, the Chief Personnel Officer, the Acting Deputy CPO, and also the Permanent Secretary in the Ministry of Public Administration and Communications, the Acting Director of Public Management, the Director of PMCD, and the PMCD Officer 2. I would also like to thank the Deputy Chair and the Commissioner of the Public Service Commission, and also the Director and Human Resource Advisor 3 from the Public Service Academy, and the Director of Personnel Administration and the Deputy Director for coming and having this very enlightening conversation with us. I would like to take the opportunity on behalf of the committee to wish you all and the wider Trinidad and Tobago a transformative, productive, and prosperous 2018. I would like to thank the members of the media and the general listening public of Trinidad and Tobago for participating in this meeting here this afternoon, and also to wish Trinidad and Tobago a happy new year. Please reach home safely. Thank you very much. This meeting is now suspended.